So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I know that there are some folks who are still going to be logging in and joining us for this, what might be just a little over 90 minutes of webinar. My name is Essie Ameri, and I am the Global Network Weaver with the Global Fund for Community Foundations. In today's call, I am joined by my colleague Wendy from the Global Fund as well. Unfortunately, today, Jenny, our executive director, is on her way to Malawi, supporting one of our fellows, Robert White, with the Tilitonse Foundation, as he launches the Shift the Power program later in Malawi this week. I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about that when he gets to speak. Our partner, Root Change, who we partner with for this fellowship, should also be on this call. And if I see them, I'll just definitely shout them out so that you guys can know them. So let's get started. I am so excited to be holding this conversation with the first cohort of the Shift the Power Fellows. What started out as an idea, a small idea, a way to test our hypothesis of what is possible when you burst through silos in our work in development, when you bring people together, when you design new power, and when you dream together. This idea, this concept, finally resulted in the 12 fellows of the inaugural Shift the Power Fellowship. 8 of them are from Sub-Saharan Africa, 2 are from East Asia Pacific, 1 is from Latin America, and 1 from Europe. The idea of the fellowship was to help strengthen the collective weave between change makers globally, and by doing so, deepen and expand the Shift the Power movement in terms of social and relational capital. One of our starting points for this fellowship was our work on social network analysis and the importance of relationships and relational power. Here, we partnered with Root Change for this fellowship, who I mentioned earlier, who has been working with us on the Pando Shift the Power network map. When we made the first call for applications back in April of last, we were pleasantly surprised, so I'm pleased and surprised with the high level of interest and applications we received. In just over a week, we received 140 applications. And this suggested to us that there was a perceived need and hunger for involvement in this type of work, that there is a strong interest in the role of networks, systems, and change makers in achieving lasting, systemic, and transformative change. We had our own ideas and expectations of the fellowship, but we were not prescriptive with specific outcomes and deliverables. And I think the fellows can attest to that. We were intentional about a light touch fellowship, one that provided space for the fellows to think and reflect on the wider Shift the Power ecosystem, how they themselves, as individuals and the organizations that they are part of, contribute to advancing this global agenda. As I mentioned earlier, the fellows all come from different parts of the system with their own understanding and biases around power dynamics, traditional aid, shifting power to local organization, and shifting power to local organizations. We wanted them to lead and identify areas of interest to them and to work together in developing some of these ideas. We didn't lead this fellowship with money, but it was important to compensate fellows over the last 9 months and their organizations for the time spent during the fellowship, because it was important to have organizational buy-in in this process from the executive directors or leadership team. We knew that if the fellows were going to spend 2 days a month together during the fellowship, we certainly could not expect them to work for free. So some of the ideas and initiatives fellows engaged in during the fellowship included exploring regional and sub-regional approaches to funding practices to shift the power, starting a podcast to highlight African youth in philanthropy, creating alternative learning approaches anchored in shared values instead of prescriptive outcomes, outputs and outcomes, engaging with communities on what system change looks like that is people-led, and strengthen community philanthropy and other support systems to build agency and support social movements, especially as it pertains to international humanitarian architecture and philanthropic response. This was more highlighted in the recent, particularly with the war in Ukraine. And so for today's webinar, we're going to spend the next 90 plus minutes hearing from the fellows about why this journey, what this journey has meant to them, what new insights they have gained, and how it relates not only to their professional work, but to the broader Shift the Power movement. And then we'll probably have about 20 minutes or so for Q&A, and I will come back to share our thoughts around next steps and some of the initiatives that are for this year, all leading to the Shift the Power Global Summit in Colombia. So again, welcome to this webinar where we'll get to hear from the fellows. I think they're all up. If you could just sort of wave so that people know who you are so we can see you. Hello, hello. And I'm assuming that some of, if you haven't, you've probably read their bios on the Shift the Power Treehouse, and they themselves can probably give you a little bit of their backgrounds when they speak. So we have just 4 questions, or at least just 4 questions that I'll be asking the fellows, and not all of them are going to speak to every question. And unfortunately today we don't have all fellows on the call. I know one is in transit somewhere in the air, that's Nino. We also have a fellow that just had a baby, that's Eme from Nigeria. So unfortunately she's busy being a new mom and all of the beautiful things that come with that. So she cannot join us on this call this afternoon. But we are excited to have the rest of the fellows with us, and they will be sharing their experiences shortly. So my first question is going to be targeted towards Manjiru, Emmanuel, Ogor, and Robert, who are on the call. So what has been your journey in the Shift the Power movement, specifically around increasing awareness with communities that you work in, and the organizations that you partner with in building agency, power, and trust? And I'm going to ask Robert, if I may, to start off first, because I know he has some exciting news to share with us about what's happening this week in Malawi.
Yeah, thank you, Essie. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, based on where you are. My name is Robert White, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Tietonse Foundation in Malawi. Yeah, the Shift the Power Fellowship for me has been an exciting journey. There are a lot of things that I've engaged in, but also the institution that I lead has engaged in. And we've engaged in mobilizing fellow civil society organizations to understand the concept of Shift the Power and also the principles of Shift the Power. But at the same time, we've also been able to reach out through the organizations that we engage, to reach out to the communities, to start appreciating how to change or to shift power in terms of our programming for development as well as humanitarian work. So we had engaged in several meetings, and out of the meetings, we've reached over 250 organizations. Of course, these were face-to-face meetings held together in forums. And then we also had the online engagement with the other organizations throughout the country in all the districts. We were doing this through a platform of the Shift the Power program in Malawi, where we are mobilizing and also sensitizing Malawians on the Shift the Power program. And we took advantage of that to also share the principles of Shift the Power, for them to understand how they can program around Shift the Power and how they can also undertake work that reflects Shift the Power. We've also been able to reach out to some of the partner organizations that we've been supporting before, sharing with them the concept. Because I'm also a member of the Shift the Power on a WhatsApp group, and there are a lot of materials that we've received from there. We've also received a lot of materials from other stakeholders, which we've been able to share with the other organizations around the various principles. And again, we've been able to share opportunities for them to learn what Shift the Power is all about. So this is how in Malawi we've been able to mobilize civil society organizations, but also communities and citizens to understand and look at Shift the Power as a way of delivering development work, and also as a way of engaging in both development as well as humanitarian work. That's what I can say on what we've so far done. But suffice again to say that we've also been developing the Shift the Power program for Malawi. And this program, as S has indicated, we are going to launch it on the 22nd and 23rd this week. Basically, it's also a continuation of what we've been doing, just to let people know what Shift the Power is all about. And we are expecting participants from outside Malawi. We've got about 11 participants, and I'm glad to say that one of the fellows, Wanjiru, is also going to join us. And we also have got other players that are prominent on Shift the Power that are going to make presentations on what Shift the Power is all about. Let me go back and also say that one of the key areas that we benefited from is the work that was being supported under Roots Change, the system strengthening. We're able now as an organization to know who is doing what out there and be able to know who we can link up with to help us, and how we can also contribute our work to what other people are doing around Shift the Power. So this broadly is what I can say. For me, as an individual, it has been a rewarding journey, because I've been able to know that it's not only us as Titose Foundation who are concerned about these issues. I now see other fellows who are doing similar work, who we can learn from, but also can assure us that what we're doing is not something being done in isolation, but there's a platform that we can rely on, because sometimes this work can be challenging, can be demotivating, but just being in a group of fellows, it's motivating. Again, understanding that the way we look at Shift the Power ourselves as Titose Foundation could be narrow, but there are other people that are doing things broad, so they've broadened our understanding of what we need to do around Shift the Power, and just the energy to be able to know that there are people out there who are doing certain things that we're not doing, we can learn from, but also that we can influence in terms of how they do things. So this is what I can start with sharing on what we are doing, what I've been doing as a fellow, but also the organization that I've been working with, how it has benefited from the work that I'm doing, and how it has been able to link out with others. Let me stop there, Esther. I know other guys also need to have time to share what they've been able to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert. I hope people can hear me. Can you nod? Oh, yes, perfect. Thank you so much, Robert. I think there was something that you mentioned in terms of realizing that you are now part of a larger community, and that the work that you are doing cannot be done in isolation. And so there's now you have a family, now you have a global movement that you can refer back to for resources, for help, for solidarity, for relationship building. So thank you so much. I'm going to turn to Ogar for the same question. What has been your journey in the Shift the Power movement, especially around increasing awareness of communities and organizations you partner with? Hi, Ogar.
Okay. Hi, Esther. Hello, everyone. Good morning from where I am. My name is Ogo Chukwudi. I'm a program associate for Trust Africa, a Pan-African organization headquartered in Dakar, Senegal. My journey in the Shift the Power movement has been incredible. I would say that I truly started to understand the concept of the Shift the Power movement, say, 2 years ago, when I worked on a project called the Kisi Trust, called the Kisi Trust Project, a project where we used participatory grant making model, and along the line, because of my work with the Kisi Trust Fund, I was nominated to join a core group of 5 to 6 activists who were co-opted to create a new grant-making program. So I'm going to be speaking on this from the grant-making lens, because that has been my focus here. We're co-opted to work on a grant-making program, and I would say that one of the things that I struggled with when we the Shift the Power movement was trust. And I would say this stemmed from my previous experiences and the traditional philanthropic model that I was used to, but joining, having more knowledge on the Shift the Power movement, and also joining this great group, this fellowship that that is going on. I was given the opportunity to learn, unlearn, and relearn about some of the principles, those traditional movements, because I realized that the traditional philanthropy ideas just tend to hold power. You hear things like, oh, we want to shift the power, but not too much, right? You don't give the organizations or community autonomy. You don't trust that they are able to do what they say they are able to do. So back to the core group I was talking about, we were a set of activists who had not just grant makers, but also grantees, people who have had opportunities to apply for grants. So we were in this group, and one thing I liked about the group is that we had complete autonomy without the funders having any say or per se, right, into what we were doing. We were able to create whatever due diligence we wanted to. We're able to talk about whether, should we have a reporting guidelines? What should our reporting guidelines be? And this core group started just as the fellowship started. So as I had meetings with my fellows, we're able to learn, how can we do this? What can be done better? I'm taking it back to my core group and saying, okay, we can actually do this better. There are certain things we don't need to follow the traditional philanthropic ideas to create this new grant-making program that we've been trying to create. And I'll say that we just finished cycle 1, and it's been incredible. The feedback has been loud, and due to what we have done, we have been invited to Trust Africa and Wallace Global Fund is hosting, at the end of this month, is hosting a funders meeting. So we've been invited to that meeting to share our experience, what has been done in terms of participatory grant making, how we're able to do it. And we are sharing this to funders. Funders are able to learn that there are alternative approaches to grant making. It doesn't have to be the same top to bottom approach that we're used to. It can be collaborative. We can trust the people. We can trust that they know what they want and they are able to do what they said they would do. So for me, I would say, just like Robert has said, the fellowship has been great. Meeting 11 other fellows from 11 different countries and one of the things I like about the fellowship is that we're all from the different parts of the philanthropic ecosystem, and people are bringing their own ideas, and you are learning and they are learning from you from the different aspects. And again, we can't do this in silos. I realized that we need to work together. We need to brainstorm together. How can we do better? How can development be sustained? How can we work together as a community to bring proper development? So I'll stop there. I know I've taken a bit of time. Sorry.
Well, thank you so much, Ogora. I think there were 2 things you mentioned. One around trust building, which is really at the core of the Shift the Power movement. They're really that are important. Sorry, if you are not speaking, I think that was Elizabeth, please put yourself on mute so that we can clearly hear. We also have interpreters as well. So I would ask that you be on mute. But thank you so much for your presentation, Ogora. Trust building, working in communities in conflict, which is what you started off with the Kisi Trust, is also a challenge. And how do you build trust? And how do you sustain those relationships over time? time. So thank you. I'm going to move on to Wanjiru from the Kilimani Project Foundation. I think she is on here, or she was on here earlier. If you are there, just please put on your video so that we can see you. There you are. Well, I know you said you had network issues, but the same question to you too, Wanjiru.
Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon. Hello, everyone. It's really great to be here, to see familiar faces, and to meet new people. So, I'm excited, and I'm Wanjiru Kanyiha, representing the Kilimani Project Foundation. We are based in Nairobi, not too far away from our central business district. We're a community of business people. We're a community of residents and, other stakeholders who are interested in Kilimani. We have been in existence since 2013. We are celebrating our 10th year of community action as a community foundation, and we're really excited about that. And I was really excited to be part of this fellowship journey. I had the honor of meeting, the brilliant minds who are represented within the fellowship, and the other partners that we've been able to meet along the way, to travel and to get to understand what really shifting the power means. Even as we continue in our work. And I can say for me, even as I joined the fellowship, again, it was a true honor to be considered because I'm seen as a thought leader in my community, and beginning to deepen the shift the power philosophy within our communities was interesting for me to learn. And for me, the few lessons I picked, even as we continue building our social movement within Kilimani, is it was based on three things. And even as I joined the fellowship, for me it was to unlearn some of the harmful and destructive things we have learned within community development. And number three, to relearn and see what we can build with what we already have within the communities. So for me, the first thing was learning what really it means to shift the power. And that for me we'd have to deconstruct really how we were working. And, I got to understand the current landscape, within which we're operating, with the existing inequality, racism, xenophobia, even within our own community here in Kilimani. It is real and it is here with us. And also get to understand the power imbalances that exist in the current aid system, and once you're within these spaces, then you begin to understand why things happen the way they do, and nothing is by fluke or by luck, it's by design. So once I began to understand these structures and how then to begin to deconstruct them, including conversations around decolonization of aid and how African and community groups can actually be at the table when these conversations are happening. I also learned how it's important and necessary to deconstruct how we've been working and being truthful and honest about that. Because I think it was Ogo who mentioned that sometimes we shift power unto ourselves, right? Rather than to the communities we work with. So for me, it was beginning to really understand what it means to be actually community-led and community-driven. That was a great lesson for me. The second thing was about unlearning, right? And, the shift the power movement is about shifting mindsets. And for me, it began with my own and beginning to shift my own mindset about what community development means. And also understanding that I'm not the savior of my community. I'm not here to save anybody, right? The community has the resources, they have the answers, they have the capabilities. Really for us, and my position and the community foundation that I lead is that of a steward, a shepherd, if you will, guiding and directing the community to provide in terms of how to do some things, but letting the community innovate and look for their own solutions. And for me, I think that's where the agency and the trust comes in. And the Shift the Power Fellowship has really been keen and strong in allowing me to see that as well. And from where we sit, allowing my board in terms of how we're going to continue running the foundation. The last one was about relearning and continuing to build collaborations and strategic partnerships in this work we're doing. I have learned that we need to widen our focus and in doing so also be mindful and careful so that we are not lost and hijacked by people with other agendas other than our own, and who don't share the common values that we do. And for me, I was excited because all the other fellows in this fellowship, espoused the similar values, around community, around solidarity, around building equitable and equity within the communities within which we work. And for me, I was really encouraged, even as we continue to engage and talk about what we do and how we can change the systems, that, I was beginning to relearn some of these things and to begin to shift and adjust how we've been working before, so that we are more inclusive and our communities really feel the impact of what we are doing. I'm going to stop there right now, but I know we'll come back. But also just to mention in closing that I understand that this is the beginning and the continuation of a journey, working with others, sharing stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's nothing wrong in sharing our failures, because that's where we learn to rebuild, and knowing that there are people to call on, these lovely people on this call when things get tough or blurry and uncertain. So thank you so much, Ese, for that, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Wanjiru. I want to pick up on something that you mentioned, that, this is not the end. I know that we are technically saying goodbye to the first cohort, but this is really not the end. This is really the beginning. And this is a journey, and we consider you part of the family now. And that trust building and solidarity continues onwards. So thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to turn to Emmanuel now for the same question. Hi, Emmanuel. I think I see you.
Hi. Oh,
there you
can
are.
you see me? Ah,
Yes.
Great. Can you hear me? Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Emmanuel Waiswa. I'm based out in Kampala most of the time. I work with a small grassroots grant-making institution called Civil Collective. And before I can talk about the experience in the fellowship, we'll just talk about how Civil Collective came to be. So a number of years ago, we were contracted to do some work as a group of professionals to go to Western Nile, which is a region in Uganda that has a high number of refugees and host community members. So part of the work was to try and understand what could we do differently if we were to work there with the institution that we were contracted by. And on reaching there, part of the frustration was that there was a lot of money that was spent on building schools, building hospitals, with obviously the common and general assumption that this was the right thing to do. But very little was done to try and understand what could people do differently if they had the resources, they had the space, the skills to do things the way they would prefer to do it. And that's the responsibility we had, to go in there and study what was not working. And we came to realize that there's a lot that people could be doing. Even the community-based organizations were saying, this is what we do. And we stopped the conversation and said, wait a minute, what would you do if you had unlimited access to resources? If you didn't have to think about how much you need to fundraise from funder X and having to fill their basket or bucket and a checklist, what would you do? And the programs they mentioned would look totally different from what they were doing. So that got us to understand that there was a power imbalance where the people with the money were calling the shots. And the people without the money then would say yes to money that would do more damage to their own self-belief and agency as well. So we came back frustrated, but obviously we had done the job. We put the learnings together for a program that later was launched there. Wasn't very successful though, because of a number of dynamics. But we came back and said, we need to do something. And one thing we believed in was, we as professionals who had worked in the development space had a lot of power and privilege. And one way we're going to do anything was to let go of that power. One, by not starting a large organization where we are constrained by the need to build strong systems, respond to calls for proposals, staff a large team. So we decided to do something more flexible. We said we'll do an organization that is totally different and unique. So we have an organization where we are not employed by the organization. We are all literally volunteers or consultants. We don't have jobs in there as full-time. We come to work on things that we are passionate about. we do not take money if we know that money will not take us to where we want to go. And where we want to go is to have freedom of choice. And if we want that, it got us thinking the communities we're working with equally want the same. So we said even our grant making would look different. We do not ask people to fill any checklist or respond to a project and say we are implementing project X, please send a proposal. And for me, part of the learning from the fellowship has been to concentrate and focus on doing exactly that, doing development differently. And by listening to different folks who are doing work in the different areas where we all are based, got me thinking, oh, we are not the weird ones in the room. There are actually many other people that are starting to think about this differently. And for me, that has been an incredible value to this experience, given that we are all confronted with the need to try and shift the dynamics that we operate in. But most importantly, we have been thinking about how to mainstream shift the power internally in how we work, in ensuring that none of us has more power and privilege over any other team member. If we're making decisions, we all have to make the same decisions equally without necessarily saying I am a founding director, so I have more privilege to do A, B, C, D. And the more we do that, it reflects, even when we partner with the communities, they try to see that the way we're working with them is totally different from how they've worked with other NGOs previously. So people question, what exactly do you do? They say, no, we don't have any project. Our work is to partner with you and follow whatever you choose to do. We are just outsiders. We are here to listen to what you want to do. We will offer some support, but not entirely. So we want to work with you to develop your own path to where you want to go. And lastly is just connecting to a network of resources, knowledge. We've benefited so much by just having the monthly calls as a cohort and trying to learn from each other, get learnings from other speakers. I've also had the opportunity to interact with other folks through this fellowship who I would not have necessarily met and had an easy chat, like just 5 minutes easily, because I am a fellow now and in a network where there are other folks who would ideally align. And that has been very helpful. We are currently challenged with the need to try and work with politicians. Locally, we're seeing a very high opportunity to work with individuals who have high income. And part of that is the political class. And there's been mistrust between communities and the political class as they only come back to communities to look for the next votes to go back into office. So we want to try and shift that by working with them from the onset. And we have a very interesting opportunity where we are partnering with a legislator in Uganda to try and work with a community where he comes from without necessarily him calling the shots, but saying, I have a bit of more money than anyone else in that village. So if I put my money as a grant, and then the community also matches that with their own resources, then they can do whatever they want, because I can't cause change as an individual, but the communities can if they organize themselves. So to me, overall, it's really been an incredible experience. I've connected with very incredible individuals who you've already heard from, and you will soon hear from another bunch of them. And they all bring something very interesting, whether they're coming from a different context, whether they're working with a different sub category of people or community. It has just been an incredible honor to learn from each one of you. And thanks to the Global Fund, this has really been great.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. I think you bring up the issue of trust building again. And in particular, what you mentioned about having the agency and power to say no. Sometimes the funding that takes you in a completely different direction. And what does that mean for the communities that you serve? So thank you so much. I'm going to move on to the next question. And I'm also conscious of time. So I'm going to just encourage the fellows in your response to just keep to about 5, maybe 7 minutes in your response so that we can get through all of it. So the second question is going to be directed to Deepthi. and Jim. In thinking through visibility and growing the evidence base for community philanthropy, what have you seen as some alternative narratives on human rights and social justice issues and its implications to funding marginalized groups? I'm going to start with Deepthi. I think there she is. Hi.
Thanks, Essay. It's amazing to be here, and after hearing the testimonies of others, you feel like such a small cog in a big wheel. I'm Deepthi. I am the strategy and narratives facilitator for Urgent Action Fund Asia and Pacific. We are a regional fund, one of 4 funds which are part of the Urgent Action Fund sisterhood. And we support human rights defenders, women and non-binary human rights defenders across Asia and the Pacific. So we're talking about roughly 50 countries that we work across. And one of the first things we were very intentional about was changing the way monitoring and evaluation was done and stressing more on learning and accountability. And monitoring and evaluation, not just to ensure accountability to the donors, as it is understood across most of our funding/donor world, but to ensure that the accountability is towards the communities and the human rights defenders we work with as well. And for us, centering that was very important. And that's where our quest to kind of shift the power dynamics that exist across the grant-making funding world began. We were very intentional to work with what other fellows called the trust of the communities that we work with, but also to ensure that whatever we were learning could be fed back into the system. So it was not an easy process, and it took a long time. And as I was doing it, I think over the best part of the last year, having this chance to be in this cohort really helped me solidify my thinking around why it's important. So in each session, as I spoke about what we were trying to do, the success we were having, how we were doing it, and the enthusiasm and the feedback that I received from the fellows really helped me in understanding that there is an appetite for within the grant making world, especially, to look beyond the binaries of, this is the money we got, this is how we spent, this is the impact we had. I've always questioned how we can talk about impact when we are such a small player in a large ecosystem. And I'm not just talking about my fund, but I'm talking about all of our work. If we don't see it as something that we do in a group, in community, in solidarity with others involved, there is no way we can attribute change or impact to ourselves. So even when we speak to the donors who gave us money, we were very intentional about telling them that, listen, these are not our stories. We can provide a platform for grantees who have received the money from us to speak for themselves. But the stories that we bring to you are not our stories to tell. The stories that we can tell you are of what's happening around the world and why it's important to support human rights defense. So in that sense, shifting the power is so important to ensure that the voices who are never heard, people who never get the platforms, do get those platforms. So one of the conscious attempts that we as a funder have been trying to do is to ensure that there is care centered in everything that we do. In every convening, we ensure that all the accommodations needed for people to be able to show up and be present fully is made available. And we always encourage people to look at resources beyond dollars. So there is always the power in money that is exploited and that holds above other kind of resources. So we have been trying to front and center how resources, volunteering, knowledge sharing, these are all ways of proving how rich we are internally. So not just thinking of it as a kind of a power over, but a power with format. And that to us has been very key. And for me, I say with this fellowship, what I've most cherished, and I was just talking to a couple of other fellows as we were collectively working towards this webinar, and we were all saying how difficult it is to think that this is the last time we will convene together as a group. But you know, the relationships that we have taken away from this you know, this first cohort, which I think has extended more than even what you thought it would be, the relationships that we take away, I think, will stand us in good stead, you know, as we move on to doing other things. But we always have shift the power as a mantra at the back of our heads. Thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Deepthi. I think, you know, that I think you said something around resources is more than money. And when communities are able to see the power that they bring to the table or the power that they bring to conversations, that's when true shifting of power happens. So thank you for that. Jim, I think he's on there. Yes, do I see him? Hi, Jim. Same question to you. What have you seen as some alternative narratives, especially around human rights and social justice, and its implications to funding marginalized groups or communities?
Thank you very, very much, Ese, and this is really a wonderful opportunity to share and engage. And just to say that I am Jim Jik-Fomunjong. I work for the West Africa Civil Society Institute, which is based in Accra, Ghana. And, you know, our work really spans with supporting civil society organizations across West Africa. And, you know, being a fellow, one of the key things, a Shift the Power fellow, one of the key things that this fellowship, you know, helped me with is to really sharpen my understanding of the Shift the Power concept, appreciate its practice as it manifests itself within our sector, and see how best we as actors in the ecosystem in West Africa in particular, we can play a role to really ensure that there is a shift. And one thing that can really help us make that shift happen is capitalizing on evidence. You know, and to an extent, the volume of evidence that exists to demonstrate the power we have and how we can capitalize on that power to equate ourselves with the dominant power of financial resources that often supersedes our asset-based power is really something key. And in a piece of research that we recently conducted, and it was in collaboration with the Global Fund for Community Foundation, the NEAR Network, and Save the Children Denmark, basically focusing on Mali and Burkina Faso, we explored and understood that there are intrinsic ways of doing amongst communities, ways of manifesting aid amongst communities that valorize their well-being and helps them respond to their needs critically. One of them is what we call the Habanaye, and that will really go with Deepti's assertion that resources go beyond money. The Habanaye system is basically a system that aids people with resources, in this case, animals, to support their neighbors, their family members who do not have as much, by offering them a female of what you have more of. When you now get a female animal, you are able to cater for that animal, ensure that there is breeding, you know, procreation, and you can then convert the offspring of what you receive into monetary resources in some instances, or use it for trade by barter. In so doing, you ensure that the less privileged do have a minimal asset that can enable them to get to the level where you are, or close to, or at least minimize the extent of suffering caused by the lack of or inadequacy of resources in their household. And this really helps to create some degree of equilibrium. This is just one. The other is the tontine system. I wouldn't really talk much about that, but the tontine system is basically a microcredit scheme amongst a group of persons within a community that ensures that within a defined period, we pull together resources and give to one member within that community who is part of that tontine system. The essential thing with these pieces of practices that are existing in a concept, and that I am getting to get more aware of, is that within the societies where we are in, and we perceive that we don't have as much power because of the perceived absence of resources, we have a lot. And many of these communities are leveraging on that a lot, in quote, to respond to their immediate needs, even before, donors, bilateral donors, institutional donors come with financial resources that to an extent we tend to perceive as the most important. When we look at, recently in my country, there was a flood that occurred in Boya, the southwest region. We haven't had donor funding yet. Who are those offering blankets, shelter, taking these victims to the hospital, to these, who are those offering this assistance to these victims? They are the neighbors, they are the community. And so it's really important to recognize that within our society, within our communities, there are enormous assets that are being utilized at the community level, but they are not being projected to the high tables of some of our conversations. And it's important that we start bringing these to the fore, because if we bring these to the fore, recognize them, appreciate them, and give matching support to what already exists in ways that respond to the needs of those who need them, we will be making more significant milestones, in our effort to drive a more holistic, responsive, and respectable humanitarian and development agenda. I will pause here for now, and I will definitely come back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. I'm going to say one of the things I've loved having you as part of this cohort is just your sheer energy with the work, with just, what you bring to the table. So thank you so much. And I think, you mentioned in the beginning that, you needed to understand the shift the power movement when you started. And I thought, if anybody knows it already, it's Jim. You've been doing this. This is the work that you and Waxy have been doing in West Africa. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to move quickly to our next question. And this question is going to be directed to Kathy, Jim again, and Elizabeth. There are a couple of Elizabeths on this call, so I don't know who is the real Elizabeth, so I hope you will stand up. There was also a problem early in the beginning while we started late of who's the real Essie. But recently, there's been much talk about decolonizing aid, reimagining the space for INGOs, which I know Jim has been a part of with Ringo, and shifting funding practices to give access and agency to groups on the ground. Around decolonizing aid, what has this work actually looked like for you in the countries and in your local context? I'm going to start off with Kathy.
Thanks, Ese. I just have to say that I think 9 months on in this fellowship, and I'm still mesmerized and inspired by Jim's passion. I think every time I'm starstruck, every time he's talking. So yeah, thank you, Jim. It's hard to come after you talking. But hi, everybody. I'm Kathy Gordo, and I'm working with Global Giving UK as a program lead. I am based here in the Philippines. Before responding to that question, Ese, let me just say that it has been a real pleasure to take part in this collective work of challenging power dynamics in the sector. I think having a shared and safe space where we reflected individually and as a group has enabled us to engage in difficult yet honest conversations. I hope we engage in honest conversations, and that allowed us to create our own little pathways on how we could contribute to the Shift the Power movement in general. So going back to your question, shifting funding practices is a conversation that I really feel so passionate about, because I think, like many of us here in the room, my development work journey has started with a local organization, and I sort of made my way up to sit on the other side of the table, working with INGOs, well, also known as donors to some. So I sort of, if you're interested to read more of my after 40 reflection, I have written a piece under the Shape the Power website. Shout out to Eshban who helped me craft this. I am pasting it here if you have some time. I agree that there has been so much talk about localization and decolonizing aid, but sometimes engaging in high-level, global, and institutional conversations can also be frustrating because at the end of the day, the same question remains for most of us. Like, now what? I think that's why it's really critical to share our collective experience and demonstrate what's really working for us, what equitable partnership means and really feels like, how we are showing up differently to every partnership conversation and meetings, and how we are treating this not as projects, but a learning and partnership journey. So in the Philippines, for example, Global Giving, GFCF, Nonprofit Finance Fund, and the Center for Disaster Preparedness, we are all currently working with different organizations, both national and community-based, in running a grant-making facility that hopefully puts community at the center of the process and support communities, agency, and strengths. So this means designing a streamlined grant application process for grassroots organization, giving leverage to include non-registered organizations who were previously excluded by some funders and donors. And we encourage submission of proposals in local dialects, which could be in written, video, or audio format, however they are comfortable. So we invested in 3 partnership conversations that are really mindful of the inherent power dynamics. We try to move away from check boxes and pass or fail kind of due diligence system process. We have discussed with partners that they could and should say no if they feel that it's a one-sided conditions, particularly on contracts. So we can come up with mutually agreed recommendations moving forward. I think this also requires understanding that not all local organizations have equal capacity. So having a standardized policy, tools, templates, and even ways of working may be efficient, but they may not be as effective. So for intermediaries, of funds such as INGOs, I guess this means challenging the dominant aid system that puts local partners at the periphery and sometimes mere project or activity implementers, and also taking a good look at their role in the wider aid ecosystem. So I will borrow a very profound story from our partner Indigenous Peoples community in Palawan, where they asserted that they prefer to be on a boat than in boxes. And so for me, this means that it's really important to understand where they want to sail and how they want to sail, rather than putting much emphasis on our much valued, clean-cut and neat logical frameworks. So while we are demonstrating the specifics and the practices, I think we are also continuously engaging our partners and donors. Shout out to Local Works Initiative of USAID, because we hope to anchor these little steps even just on their program portfolio. But of course, I think there's that desire to influence the different agencies and donors still. And we are also talking with networks and alliances who are willing and brave enough to maybe shake the status quo and take the conversations a bit further toward mindset shifts and organizational changes. So I'll stop right here for now, and we'll let other fellows talk.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kathy. It's also really great just hearing from you and the core examples in terms of really, focusing what might seem like on the small bits of the program is actually what makes the difference further down. So thank you so much. I'm going to turn this now to Elizabeth, and just before Elizabeth comes on, Jim, I know this question was also for you, but I want to give space for some of the other fellows who have not spoken. So maybe we'll come back to you during the Q&A. But Elizabeth, if you can also answer this question, if you think you're if you could put on your video, there you are, hello, and just also answer this question in terms of like, what does it look like on the ground around decolonizing, reimagining this space for NGOs for your work? I think you're on mute. You're on mute.
Hello, are you getting me now from the other end? So I think I must say that what we have learned from the Shift to the Power movement is a lot, and we may not be able to say everything what we learned in a few minutes, which we have here. But for me, I must say it's been a nice experience to learn how some of the things we assume that they happen because they do happen. But we've been able to learn one, that Shift the Power movement is one of the leader in the Magic Quadrant for shifting the sustainable development to communities. And because of one or two things, one of them is what we look at it is the network. The network is so immense, so huge, from the ground up to the top of the funders. We've also seen the strategy, which is quite immense, the manifesto, which gives direction on how to tackle some of these issues, which are quite complex in some of the areas. And the movement is quite people-centered. And that's how community groups, smaller community groups like us, Nguzo Africa, where I work as director, were able to interact with some of the leading players in the issues of sustainable development and humanitarian work delivery. So what I'm saying that at the community level, as long as we talk so much, the debate on localization and coordination of aid, which is very critical and is gaining a lot of prominence at the global level, but at the communities, at the community level, some of those excitements are not felt as such. If you look at I asked some of my colleagues who work with at the community level, how do you know about the ODA DAC recommendations? Do you know about grant per gain? Do you know about the commitment for big funders to have at least 20% to communities or community organizations? Much also our people don't know these things, including myself. But through the network, I've been able to see a lot of opportunities available. And what remains for us as ROCO and the community organizations is to find the best way possible to prepare ourselves to have the demand side, to agitate some of these issues so that they can also be felt and add at the global level. When we are talking about the OECD commitments, the Grand Bargain commitments, the bridge for change commitments from international NGOs, 20% localization issues to community organizations. How are community groups, community organizations involved in this process? And I think that's the area where we have learned a lot, and there's a lot of interest in that area, that most of these commitments are not grounded as such, and they have not been committed to the communities. So in terms of the fellowship, I think it was, and it means a true honor for us to meet the change makers who have shared a lot, and we shared a lot through the fellows, with the fellows, through writing, through the podcast, and even networking in Uganda, where we learned that most of these complex issues we are facing are also replicated as templates to countries similar like us. We assume that it is us, but also we find the same challenge in Kenya, the same challenge we have in Ukraine or in Georgia or in South America, Brazil. So it is something which, if we work on our ecosystem through the Pando networks and other ecosystem providers, we can bring up the down up change so that we have a sustainable development which promotes community engagement, sustainable development which promotes ownership of the communities, sustainable development which looks at the people as not just receivers of aid, but the actors of the aid. So I think that's the thing we have learned. And there's a lot we are planning to do as Nguzo Africa and my team, that we need to strengthen the Shift the Power movement in our communities. We need to widen our learning in this space and also strengthen ourselves, not to fail or to become the other bad organizations, but also people who bring good development. And also the interacting or interrelated issues of community philanthropy, the issues of local resource mobilization and the social impact investments are some of the issues which can make us grounded and become more sustainable in pushing the Shift the Power agenda to another level. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Elizabeth, during the fellowship, has written quite a lot, and I'm going to post hopefully towards the end recall some of the writings he has done. His organization, Inaugural Africa, is really working at the grassroots level and really pushing around decolonizing and really sort of, in some sense, I would say, grabbing back power for actors within and stakeholders within the community to work. So thank you so much. Our last question before we go into Q&A is going to be to Marianne and Willa. I think I saw Willa earlier. And this is around a somewhat controversial word. What does building resilience using the ethos of community philanthropy actually look like for you and your work? That there's some folks who see resilience as actually it's not a positive thing because it means you're walking through struggle or walking through adversity. But how has resilience using community philanthropy actually shown up for you and your work? So let me start off with Marianne.
Thank you so much, Esty. It's so nice to see so many people here to discuss the Shift the Power movement through the fellowship. And I'd like to acknowledge also the participation of Paula. She's the chair of ECOM, an organization that I have the pleasure to collaborate for so many years, and does community philanthropy in the south of Brazil. So, going back to your question, I say, if we think about the word resilience, it means the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties we face or the ability to adjust easily to change, right? So based on my experience working at Econ, for example, the conversations that I have had with peers, with other Shift the Power fellows, and other people that are working in the field, I collected some learnings, and I'll be very quickly also because of time. But in the community level, resilience usually is built around the capacity of a group or community to mobilize, to articulate and collaborate with different players in facing public social justice issues and to creatively find responses. So Jim was talking about floods that happened in his community, and then we have faced similar events here in Florianopolis, and that we were able to mobilize different players from different sectors, so usually community philanthropy organizations. And when you look at community philanthropy as a practice, it really strengthens your ability to kind of articulate and quickly and collaborate with these players. And also it's important to keep an updated mapping of the reality of your territory and the openness to pay attention to what's in fact happening in your community, and having the flexibility to act around those events that are happening to bring it change. Also, it's important in building resilience to build a strong culture of giving, because I believe that strong communities, they are able to deploy local resources very quickly. So if you have individuals and organizations that are putting resources in a collective way, they're able to respond quickly to situations that were bringing emergency situations and things like that. And the last thing that I wanted to bring, it's about relationships. There was also a research that was conducted by the Global Fund in partnership with Global Giving, that's called 10 Things We Have Learned About Community-Led Philanthropy, that I recommend. And one thing that they talk about is about relationships that are the foundation of community-led work. So I really believe that building strong and well-maintained relationships, it allows communities to govern themselves and identify the work that's really important to them. So that's the few examples that I brought around resilience. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I also want to say in the chat, there are some really great links to some of the things that the fellows have been mentioning. So thanks to Wendy and I forgot to say hello or to introduce Ashban, who is, I was assuming that you were on your way to Malawi, so I'm glad that you're here with us, Ashban. So thank you so much for putting some of the links in the chat. Same question is going to go to Wheeler around building resilience.
Thank you so much, Esa. Can you get me? Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
All right, great. Thank you so much. It's been amazing listening to all the various, don't mind the headphones, I know I look like I work for a call center. Yeah, thank you so much to all the amazing views that have come to the fellows. I hope my internet will, if my network is shaky, just please let me know and I'll be able to maybe turn off my video and just speak using audio. I think 2 years back, I came across this cool hashtag. You know, I didn't know so much about it. The only thing I knew is that it was a really pretty cool hashtag. You know, and then, you know, I could, one of the things I also used to do is that every time I could do a tweet or make a post, I could quickly see how best I can paste the hashtag just for me to, you know, to look pretty cool as well, you know, but I had no idea about it. You know, just before even getting to my submission, my name is Mwila. I work for an organization called Africa Philanthropy Network, and I also lead an organization in my country called Be Relevant Africa. With the APN, I am working as communications expert, where I am managing the whole entire communication system for the organization around the whole entire aspect of African philanthropy. So coming back to my submission. So just a few years back, I had no idea about what Shift the Power was. And then after having been, you know, enrolled, you know, on the actual program, on the actual fellowship, you know, I came now face to face with the whole entire broad spectrum of what this amazing concept really conceptualizes. And it really came to my mind that this is a conversation that should not only be stuck in intellectual corridors. This is not a conversation that should only be discussed in spaces where, you know, people that can understand English or people that can understand French can reside. But this is a conversation that should be trickled down all the way down to the grassroots level. And then when I asked myself that particular question, I came to understand that it is not anyone else that can actually do that work, you know, for me. I'm able to see that the Shift the Power ideology or philosophy is deserving to be trickled down to the grassroots level. What am I going to do about it? And working with so many young people across the African continent, I then try by all means to see how I can get the information that I'm being fed out of the fellowship and trying to see how I can inculcate that kind of information within, you know, to the young people that, you know, I'm exposed to. And that also now comes to the broader conversation of community philanthropy. And I like how, you know, the question has been raised, how, you know, what does building resilience using the ethos of African philanthropy look like to you? And I think, you know, before I even get to that point, the question I think we should be asking ourselves is that what really is African philanthropy? And I think in the year 2018, I remember reading an article that was written by, Jenny and Anna on the whole entire idea of community philanthropy and shifting power. And I loved how they defined the whole entire broad spectrum of community philanthropy, where they went on to say that, you know, community philanthropy is both a form and a force for locally driven development that strengthens community capacity and a voice that builds trust and, most importantly, taps into and builds on local resources which are put together to build and sustain a strong community. And that in itself, I think, drove the conversation where we intend to mistake the idea of community foundations as well as community philanthropy. But when we look at the whole entire conversation of community philanthropy, it's a practice on its own. And we should not necessarily look at it as an organizational embodiment. Community philanthropy has existed, you know, it's longer than human civilization. When we come to the African continent, we look at community philanthropy in the context of the Ubuntu philosophy. We look at the concept of, you know, community philanthropy in the ideology of Harambe, you know, in Kenya. And that in itself should be something that entails that community philanthropy in itself should not be an idea that should only be considered at a highly exalted level. But then one of the things that we have also noticed is that we have created a particular world where the community has to shut up, and then they have to listen to us as we implement certain ideas within their particular community. And that in itself, inhibits the extent to which we can build resilience. And this was some of the conversation that we're exposed to during the actual fellowship. So now the question that comes back, how then can we build resilience using the ethos of community philanthropy? And how does this look like? I think for me and the works that I do, what this basically means is to understand that information in itself is a new currency, ladies and gentlemen. Sustainability cannot exist in a space of ignorance. And that's something that we have to understand. And in order for us to do this, we have to ensure that we no longer prioritize money as a driver to systemic change. We need to ensure that we advance information building as a new currency, because if society is not equipped with the right kind of information in order for them to drive their own development within their community, it becomes difficult for us to achieve sustainability. The other points I also just want to talk about, that we were also exposed to while in the fellowship, is the idea for us to shut up and listen if we really want to build resilience. Because if we're going to a community assuming that we know it all, it becomes difficult for us to achieve sustainability. Communities understand better the challenges they are encountering. You cannot come into my house and tell me the problems I'm encountering and tell me that you have a better solution. It's better we sit at the table and we have a conversation in order to have the kind of solution that is community-led, community-driven, and community implemented. As I conclude, the other thing I also just like to state is that in order for us to build resilience, we should see youth as the bedrock of innovation that advances community philanthropy. Resilience, ladies and gentlemen, in itself is incomplete if we exclude intergenerational leadership. That in itself helps us to ensure that the kind of ideas and solutions we're bringing to the table are generational, they are sustainable, and they can have a spillover effect to generations to come. So thank you so much, Asa. I'll end there for now. And it's really been an amazing journey being part of this amazing fellowship. And for me, it will no longer just be a hashtag, but it'll be a concept that drives my work in every space that I find myself. Thank you, Asa.
Thank you so much, Willa. The evolution of just seeing it as a hashtag and really embodying, especially with the work that you do with African youth, and truly seeing them at the centerpiece for driving this transformative change that we want for the sector. I liked your comment about we need to shut up and listen, and I think this is a good time to say that the fellows are going to listen to questions that are coming from the audience in the room. If you have a question, you can either type in the chat or raise your hand. I'm going to try to see if I can see the hands raised, and then give you the mic. We have the first hand, Mr. Davison. Davison, if you want to unmute yourself and ask. I know we also have, I'm trying to be mindful of time, so I would implore you to just keep the question brief. If it's aimed at a particular fellow, please let's just say that as well. I think you are mute. We can't hear you. You can unmute yourself. I'm not able to hear you. Can anybody else hear Davison?
No, he's on mute.
Please unmute yourself.
Right. Is that it? Can you hear me?
No.
Right.
Yes.
Quick question. I'm chair of a family funding organization. We're very aligned with your organization, and we're going to be taking part. Our team's going to take part in your December program in Colombia. The one question I've got is, if you look at all the funders, what is the one single change you want funders to make? What is the one most important single change that would make the biggest difference? Because we know funded to change, and there are lots of them, and they're siloed and they're segmented. I'd be really interested to hear that. And by the way, I think it's been a great session. I've learned a lot, really high quality contributions. And the thing that stood out for me most, actually, that I've remembered most was a comment by Deepthi Menon about power with. Power with. I think that's a great two-word thing that's given me a lot.
Great. So who would like to answer that question? What is the one single change that you think will make the biggest difference, especially from the funder side? I don't want to point to any fellow, but if you can, what's your wish? If you had the opportunity to say, what would that change be? Yes, Elizabeth, the real Elizabeth. I still see multiple Elizabeths on here. Elizabeth and Jim, you can unmute. Yes.
I don't know how I am seeing so many times. I don't know, but I'm now the lead Elizabeth speaking. I think the best way the funders can do is to remove the old clothes, the old templates, and learn that we have communities who are ready to work with them. But you don't have to stick to the old ways of sourcing for proposals, the old ways of doing the due diligence, the old ways of calling for proposals. You will not get. But the more you listen to communities, the more you are in this network, like Shift the Power network, you will get a number of people to work with, people who can deliver results and impact. So I think that's the best way you can do, remove the old thinking, come as a phrase as you can, and then you learn from the network, and you can also detect using your instincts the people you can work with without even going to raise your proposals online or in newspapers.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Really doing development differently then. That's the takeaway. Jim, I still see your hand up, please.
Yeah, thank you. Just to add to add to what my colleague said, it's how do we define partnerships? I think if we continue to define partnerships from the constructs of the INGO models, using some of those instruments, like lock frames, sending out calls for proposals, it still highlights the power imbalances. And take a reverse approach of saying, what do we want to work with openly, and leave your collaborators, your partners, to come to the fore and state what they want, what they need, how they want to go about it, and we accompany ourselves in that process. It will really be a game changer in the ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. I really appreciate that. I think I have one more question that I see in the chat, and this is from Paula. One question I have is about how you are planning to promote similar learning experiences and networks in your own territories or fields. Maybe you're already doing this. Does one fellow want to attempt in answering that? Or Jim again, all right?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's a very important question. And if I take, for example, the region I work for, West Africa, there are so many languages, English, French being some of the predominant languages, recognizing that these are some of the elements that enrich our diversity. Often within our space, a lot is going on in the English language among stakeholders who speak up in English. And when you talk about shift the power, the level of understanding of this concept, within French-speaking actors, when we talk about decolonization of aid, it will affect colonial subjects, particularly those who were colonized by France, more. But the level of understanding of this within those of us acting in the space is limited, localization agenda, all these things. So reaching out to these French-speaking actors, engaging with them, interrogating them as much as possible is something that, we at WACC, we are doing, and, being a fellow, I am more conscious about, and we are ensuring that we promote such agenda. And there was actually a podcast that I engaged with a stakeholder in Burkina Faso discussing what this shift the power means to actors on the ground, and what role we have to play to really ensure that there is a veritable shift in power. So that's just one highlight that I thought of sharing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. I'm going to post that. I think there was it's on SoundCloud. Let me post the link for that that you did in French about Burkina Faso. I see Robert's hand up. Please go quickly.
All right, thank you, Essie. I would want to say two things from the first question that came from you and also the one that has come from Paula. On the first question that you had raised, I want to add to say that for us, I think in terms of the funders, they need, apart from just thinking about the templates, the conditions, but they also need to change themselves in terms of how they do business and how the staff that are responsible for humanitarian and development aid understand shift the power. For us, I think the most important thing is if this is grounded in the funders, that their systems, their personnel, their operations understand what shift the power is all about, then we're going to have the change that we anticipate. On the second question from Paula, for us, we think that we first of all need to internalize shift the power within our institutions. It's not something that we should only expect others to change, whereas our own institutions still remain the same. So we need to start ourselves as institutions, as organizations, to embrace the shift the power. And when we do that, the organization that we'll be working with downstream, we also need to make sure that they embrace it. I think it was said that at the beginning to say we are not only shifting the power and remaining with the power ourselves. We need to make sure that the change that we're calling for should start with our organizations and cascade down to the downstream partners that we're working with. So for us, I think that would be very key to realize the shift the power goals. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Marianne, do you have a question or a response? I'm also seeing in the chat that I'm glad that fellows are responding to the questions there as well, just due to time restrictions that we have. But I'll give the microphone to you if you have a quick comment.
Yeah, it's a quick comment. Going back to Paula's question, those are excellent questions. I just want to mention that we're going to do a session with the fellows that are participating in the Comoa network in Brazil. I think Jonathan is here to talk about the Shift the Power movement, and that's something I haven't shared with Essie, but sharing now. And that we can also do like a similar conversation in Econ and the organizations here in Florianópolis.
Yeah, yes, that is on my radar screen, so it's not a surprise. I knew that was coming. So that is good. I think that is another way to spread the gospel, so to speak, about the work that you're doing and what this fellowship has meant. So we are at the end of our call. I do have a short video that just this is actually thanks to Marianne and her hard work in doing about what this fellowship has meant. I think Wendy will put the link on and share her screen to share the video very quickly, but I just wanted to also say that we are going to be having a second cohort of the Shift the Power Fellows. And so do watch out for the announcement in the next coming weeks about that. The modalities in terms of how many fellows and the length of it, I think it will be similar to what we had in the first cohort. So maybe another 10, 12 fellows, global fellows. For that, and has I think it was mentioned earlier, this year for the Global Fund, maybe it's the hashtag, a new hashtag, the road to Bogota. Our global summit on Shift the Power is going to be in December in Colombia. And so all of our activities, including this one, is all sort of leading mini events leading to galvanizing support, galvanizing interest, awareness about, hey, what is Shift the Power? What is community philanthropy? How can different actors sitting where they are in the ecosystem be part of this movement and be part of a broader conversation around what change looks like, what systemic transformative change looks like. So please do watch out for those announcements, one about the second cohort, and then ways for you to get involved in the road to Bogota. There'll be a number of activities, webinars, maybe some in-person meetings with some of our stakeholders globally as we lead up to that. So please watch out for that. If we're ready, I'm going to yes, I'm seeing Wendy nodding. Yes, so let's play this really short video. And this has been many weeks in making, and it's a great video, I think it is. Again, thank you, Mariam, for doing this. So now you get to see the fellows in terms of what they actually did over the last 9 months.
Nothing has gone right today. So this is just, on brand. So just hold your horses. We're just building some interest. And if this works, I need a round of applause.
It worked to the beginning. Yes, there it is. Thank you so much. I see hands up and clapping. Thank you very much. And thank you for staying just a little bit over 90 minutes. It has been really great to hear from all of the fellows, like I said in the beginning, and during the webinar. This is really not the end. I know it feels like the end for the first cohort, but this is not. The journey continues. The bus is still on the road to Bogota, so there will be many opportunities to engage you and the new class of fellows this year and moving forward. So thank you all. The recording for this will be sent out shortly after this course, sometime this week or next week. So please watch out for those and do share it within your networks as well for those who are not able to participate this afternoon or / this morning. Again, thank you so much, and I hope you have a good rest of your week. Bye-bye.